Are we waiting for anyone in particular? Everybody, equipment will be late, Andy's gonna be late. We are live. So, we are good to go. Jack, take it away.
Hey, hello everybody. For those of who may not know me, my name's Jack Farley. I'm the president of the High Desert Makers. I think everyone here has met me, other than Brent. So anyway, briefly, I know that we wanted to get a meeting scheduled early in the year, so this is as early as we could do. We've had several months off, and there's some exciting things coming up this year, so I thought it very important to meet in person to get the momentum started. So I thought I'd take a moment just to briefly go over who we are and how we got here. We are the High Desert Makers. We've been a nonprofit organization, 501(c), since approximately, I believe, Scott, 2013. That organization had a maker space called the Maker Mill for several years, and through a series of unfortunate incidents, that was unable to continue. So that organization was invited to live, if you will, at the DIY cave 3 years ago, and I had recently become a board member, and I was asked to keep it alive for the next iteration. So it's been 3 years, and it's sort of amazing that it's been that long. A year ago, or a little more than a year ago, we had a couple of events, and we were beginning to build some energy again. And our last board meeting was last February, and it's amazing how quickly that went. And the little bit of momentum that we had built has, again, gone dormant. So we thought we don't want to wait for the end of COVID to start again. We thought we would jumpstart the year 2021 and have a meeting and be a little more aggressive this year about reinvigorating the organization. And I think at the time is right because there's some events coming up that we'll hear about shortly, and I think we can participate, and I think it'll be a really good way for us to get up and running again. So, having said that, we do want to hear from everybody in the room and how they might like to get involved. But we do have a little bit of business to take care of. I just want to bring you up to date on where we are as an organization. Over the course of time, our board has diminished in size. Board members have rolled off. Currently, we're actually below our minimum amount of board members. We're supposed to have a minimum of 3. Currently, Aaron and I are the only 2 board members. So we do want to begin building a board again. So we just want to invite members at this point, but we will be looking for excited members to have a more decision-making role moving forward. Other than that, just some housekeeping. We started, 4 years ago with about $8,000 in the bank, and due to no real revenue producing events, we're down to about $5,800. Yeah. $5,800. So it's not a lot, but it's certainly something. So other than that, the way I look at this meeting today is to get some excitement started. And we're lucky in that the founding visionary, if you will, of the High Desert Makers is here today. I think that's fair to say. The only reason I'm sitting here is because of this gentleman, Scott. So he'll bring us up to date with some exciting events coming up. So I look toward hearing myself about what's coming up and how we as a nonprofit especially can participate, or not can participate, but become excited to participate, because we have some, as a nonprofit, we have some ability to do some things where maybe some others might not. So I would love to say some more words, but I do want to give Aaron a chance. Aaron, of course, is our other board member, and he is also our affiliate here at the DIY Cave, and so he has a unique perspective on all things making and this organization. And
sure. I'm happy to say a couple things. So we're entering into 2021. We're coming out of the year that shall not be named. And we're looking forward to really making a huge mark on Central Oregon in the maker movement. There's a ton of makers in Central Oregon. The people who are here in this room tonight are makers. The people who are watching this stream are likely makers. The people who haven't even found us are out there, and they're makers. And this year there are several large events that are beyond the norm. And so we expect to touch many more makers this year. And part of that is both going to require the assistance of the nonprofit, but part of it is also going to be making the nonprofit visible to these people so that they get an opportunity to plug in and find other like-minded people, and to be inspired, and to be led down the path of making and create things that they never knew they could, and to be encouraged and excited. So part of that comes down to why we exist and what are our bylaws, what is our purpose as High Desert Makers, and Jack will go over that here in a minute. Part of that also comes down to we need to become visible in order for this organization to survive. If the purposes which are outlined in the bylaws are ever to be achieved, we need people to be excited about it and be a part of it. And that starts with membership. That starts with having people be a part of High Desert Makers. And being a part of High Desert Makers is only a viable thing if there is value to that person. And we want to provide that value this year. We want to be something that people are excited to be a part of, and give people an opportunity to plug into that community and also give back. There are many people out there who would love to share that enthusiasm they have with making, if only there were other people who would appreciate it. And this year we intend to make that happen. So I, as a founding member of DIY Cave, am a maker myself. I obviously have a huge bias towards making, in the sense that I dedicated huge amounts of my time and money to making a giant money suck called the DIY Cave. Ha ha ha. But it's the thing I'm most proud of as well. Besides my children, I am incredibly proud of DIY Cave. I'm incredibly happy that it has touched many lives, and I'm incredibly proud that it has provided an environment to draw together people of every ilk and give them a place to find common ground and to, in fact, encourage each other and grow. And I want to lend that power to the organization of High Desert Makers so that it can leverage that in ways that it couldn't without, I'll call it a sister or parent or brother organization, whatever you wish, such as DIY Cave. So that's where I stand, and I'm excited to see where we go in 2021. And with that, I'll have Jack take over with Bylaws.
Sure. So I think everybody has maybe their unique ideas about what making is, and how they may personally be inspired about making. And I know I've had visions about where the making community could go, and I've actually done some writing on my vision about the maker community. But I thought it important to maybe get back to the roots of those who founded the organization as to why this High Desert Makers was formed, and what their founding thoughts were regarding the purposes. So anyway, in the bylaws, which I believe Scott was very instrumental in writing, I thought I'd just read them. I know it's a little bit mechanical, but I think it's important to get back to the roots of the organization. So as a 501(c), it's within our charter to engage in lawful activity, including but not limited to, 1, educating the Central Oregon community regarding the maker movement, quote unquote, and offering members of the public the opportunity to participate in maker activities. 2, establishing and operating physical workshops or maker spaces, quote unquote, to serve as community hubs for maker activities. 3, developing and participating in local, regional, and global events related to the maker movement. 4, delivering to the general public, including youth, through the corporation's maker spaces, events, and other activities, instrumental kit skill building and safety classes and workshops on subjects and tools useful to the community, primarily focused on STEM or STEAM subjects, science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. 2 more. 5, providing instruction or training of individuals for the purposes of improving or developing their workforce readiness in advancing manufacturing subjects through the corporation's makerspaces events and otherwise. And finally, 6, through social media, traditional marketing, and other activities and mediums, being an advocate for the maker movement, supporting regional economic development efforts to strengthen and diversify Central Oregon's economy, and working with other organizations in a collaborative manner to advance the corporation's charitable purposes. So anyway, I know that sounds rather mechanical, but I think it's important to just hear what the founding members decided was their foundational purposes. So I think some of the events that we have coming up fit right smack in the middle of that. I hate to delay any longer. I know, Scott, you're here purposefully to announce a couple events. I don't know if they're public yet, or is this the official public announcement, but I'd love it if you could say a few words about what you've been up to and what you will be up to.
Press the button, there we go. I'm going to take this off so you can hear me a little bit better here. So first off, thanks for reading back to the bylaws. The bylaws were originally created at a time when there were no maker spaces here in Central Oregon, and there really was not a whole lot of cohesive energy towards the maker movement. It existed, and in fact, it still existed in a very large way outside of our community, and people were wondering why such a progressive community that we have really didn't have the maker movement, a maker space, or any sort of collective effort. We came on board attempting to create an organization, brought different people in, ran meetups, and ultimately determined that we were in a position to create the nonprofit and help catalyze different maker spaces and different maker activities. And our first one really was just about the meetups. In that same process, and I jokingly say this all the time, having introduced Aaron to Tim and Dave from the DIY Cave, we jokingly said that at that point it really catalyzed the nonprofit and the for-profit side, because the only other one that was really existing was COCC and their Applied Technology Center that had been built up at the new campus in Redmond that really wasn't seeing the type of support or efforts that we were all looking for. So again, everybody was just getting together and trying to feel this thing out. At the time, there really were no maker spaces, and we had a relationship with, at the time, Cascade Divide, who had a building, as we know, the old Sutera building on Columbia Drive, that we took over and for a short time tried to put a makerspace in there, but that particular building had so many problems, and the relationship ultimately with Cascade Divide did not work the way we wanted to, and DIY Cave got the traction that it needed over here on what is now, of course, the 9th Street Village, the whole campus. It changed us, and we closed the makerspace itself while continuing to still represent and support the mission, the purposes. So with that in mind, I wanted to also come back and say that as you mentioned, the purposes and powers were specifically written in blocks to be able to break out into the different projects. The fact that we're not doing makerspaces didn't mean we weren't the High Desert Makers. We created a makerspace because one didn't exist. And as it did, and as others potentially were going to come online, our purpose was there to support them. So when we closed our physical building, I was going through another scenario where at the time my landlord was going through his own financial, had to move. I had other family issues, so I stepped down after my term helping start the High Desert Makers. And at the time we had our board, our fully formed board, and Jack offered to step up and help manage it. And the original goal, as we mentioned, this is also when 9th Street Village started to expand. The original goal and expectation was that by closing our makerspace, we would then get the traction to create the community of makers over here at DIY Cave, and then leverage the nonprofit aspect to be able to support activities within the makerspace. It seemed like the perfect, as we would say, the public-private partnership, but in this case, the nonprofit for-profit partnership. I think as we look back on that, it's been about, 4 years since we've done that original transition. I don't know that it's met all the expectations, but at the same point, we've gone through multiple layers of this community struggle to understand what a maker space is. We had a group here in Bend that declared themselves the Makers District, and their version of that was to sell artisanal craft that they made. We've had other programs. The schools have changed. There's been a lot of transition in terms of people and programs. The OSU Cascades campus has grown. And then, as you mentioned, where I've gone is, having come back full circle, I've gone a different route now on a personal basis and created the new nonprofit called Connect Central Oregon. It took a number of other projects that had been working, including my robotics programs, and put them under one, as I love to say, adult supervision. Okay, so here we are. And that's a great catalyst to basically say, here we are. One of the things that we've always wanted to do, and we recognize that in order to grow that community and that set of supporters that would then be able to take advantage of and deliver back to the public what the purposes of the nonprofit were, we need to have high intensity, high energy events. And in order to have the high energy events, you need people to run them. And in order to have people to run them, you need to have the space. Okay, so here we are. We are at a point now where we are ready to actually launch a couple of our high-profile projects, and another one popped up right in the middle through DIY Cave that is almost a no-brainer. And you asked earlier, we're ready to announce a couple of them. It has always been our goal to go create a maker festival, or in this particular case, hopefully a branded maker fair, and we've never really been able to pull that off because of money, time, people, and so on. And all of us collectively said, we're just going to wait until there's some momentum, Well, there's momentum. At the same point, the Make organization that ran and licensed it, themselves have gone through their own struggles, and they've gone bankrupt, and they've reorganized and reformed. So they themselves are coming back and saying, okay, here's how we need to do this now on a national and global basis. Here's how we want to run the festivals. Secondly, many of the programs, and by programs I mean the web episodes, the webinars, print media, TV media, online media, they've all adapted. I mean, Mythbusters was cutting edge at the time, and American Inventor was cutting edge at the time, and now they're not. All those programs have modified and reformed. We recently were approached, and in fact the team at DIY Cave was approached by the Make 48 team. And I think at this point, we're ready to announce publicly that Make 48, that has run multiple seasons, so it's MAKE 48, they've run multiple seasons of a syndicated TV show and a competition that is licensed through PBS. They were prepared to do another series in 2020, and COVID stopped them. So then they said, what do we do in 2021? Rather than them focus on doing their standard edition where they bring everybody back to a centralized location and run sort of like Survivor goes to one island, Bachelorette goes to one mansion or whatever, what Make 48 has decided to do is split up into city editions for the year 2021, run 10 different events, and use those events to develop the best of the best or advance one person out of each, who in 2022 will then go back into their standard model, where for, I guess they'll call it season 5, they will ultimately use that as their competition program. So with the two things happening, or three things really, in terms of the opportunity for us to create a maker festival, the amount of synergy and energy that we're having here in the community with the success of DIY Cave and 9th Street Village, and then lastly with this Make 48 conversation and opportunity, we stepped in and said, we went back and have reserved the Deschutes County Fairgrounds in November 2021. We are currently putting all of our efforts towards putting together a maker festival, and ultimately today is really the kickoff. We intend to have a maker fair or a maker festival committee with the expectation of going down the route of a licensed maker fair. But worst case is we're going to run a maker festival. In the process, we asked the Make 48 team if we had any flexibility in scheduling their selection of DIY Cave in Bend, Oregon as one of the 10 cities. And not only did they say that we have flexibility, they like a lot of the background that we've had. They love Bend. They love the people at DIY Cave. They love the people at High Desert Makers. They love the efforts that we've all put in. And they went so far as to say, we'd also like to allow you to decide if you want to run something locally in terms of your own show or make something locally here in 2021. We're not going to do anything other than collect the material that we need to cover the advancement to our show in 2022. So today is effectively the kickoff of that as well. So the announcements really come in to say this was a perfect opportunity at the beginning of this year to talk publicly about these opportunities. And going back to the original bylaws of the High Desert Makers, we wanted to say, this is what we built this organization for. It has been 8 years and we're going to be an overnight success. But from my perspective, one of the most important things that we need to do is make sure that in fact, people are willing to step up, understand what the powers and purposes are. And when I say step up, I mean understand that this is already pre-built. You don't have to do anything. There's been a lot of blood, sweat, and tears literally across the board. There is money in the bank, there is an opportunity, and there's an organization, and that there are good partners. And then again, from my new organization, Connect Central Oregon, we actually have some of the other components that I was originally intending to grow and expand as part of High Desert Makers. They now fully exist and are thriving outside in a separate organization, which is among other reasons why we're doing the live stream today. So all that background is simply to say, in many ways, we are at the perfect place where we wanted to be 8 years ago. So we're there now, and for me, among other things, it's I certainly want to pay homage to the folks that have, to our fallen comrades, almost, if you will, that have made it through this, and recognize that hanging on to this and maintaining it up to this point was not light. It can't continue like this, of course, and especially in light of the incredible efforts, the fact that there's some incredible efforts happening at the school side now on the elementary, the middle, and the post-secondary education. There's some incredible effort, and if we can't figure out as a community how to make this nonprofit thrive with all of these other educational partners and for-profit partners, this is definitely the time to say, why does this even exist here in Central Oregon? I'm very confident that we have people that are capable of stepping up and taking on new roles and helping expand it, but they have to do it. So I'll stop right there and basically say, yeah, exactly that. The original intent and the original foundation of the committee that ultimately formed the High Desert Makers asked me to serve as their president for that time period, created the makerspace, all of those things. We're now at the point where this community is ready to execute finally on the master vision. So I'm excited to be here. That said, we got to move.
Thank you, Scott, for sure. Yeah, just on our bylaws, I mean, so specifically the third point, which is developing and participating in local, regional, and global events related to the maker movement. I don't see how it could be more on point than that. And so part of our discovery, especially in the first month of the year, is to discover how the High Desert Makers can participate and both add value to and also gain value from these events at the same time. Part of it is exposure. You know, no one joins a club they don't know exists. And so that's a huge factor. And part of it is entertainment. People enjoy makers in general. They're always fascinated by people who make things and the things that are made by those people. Part of it is education. So many people, I would say kids, but really it's all ages, are crying out for this creative output in their life. They don't necessarily know they miss it. We ran into a couple, it was not this last summer, but the summer before, who came into our makerspace with their son and said, we would love to get him plugged in some way, shape, or form. Both of us have had desk jobs our whole life. We couldn't make, a round ball out of a bunch of marbles. But we don't want our child to grow up that way. How do we get him involved? And it was incredible fun to get them all involved and help them all discover the joy of making. So that's sort of where we've got to come to grips with all these beautiful opportunities that have finally, the stars have aligned, as they say, the planets have aligned. We have to take advantage of that this year. And I'm a strong believer that luck is really hard work applied in advance of an amazing thing happening. And that means we've got some hard work ahead of us. And having a team of people from different aspects of life with different creative inputs is truly the most valuable thing we could find right now, and the thing that we don't have. We have a lot of people who are tertiary, they're floating around the outside and are willing to go, oh, hey, I got a great idea. But we need people to come together and put their minds on a project together and help create direction and help create action. So our goal tonight is to start spreading that word that we want people to become members. Membership doesn't mean that they're signing up the credit card or anything like that. It's just saying, hey, send me emails, send me notifications, put me on your list. I want to be a member of High Desert Makers. You're basically joining the club by saying, I solemnly swear never to, I solemnly swear to always tell everybody about this place. And that's what our goal is tonight, is get people to spread the word, be members, and then take part in the activities that we're going to try to build this year. Jack, you want to say some more?
Sure. So as I've been a sort of a placeholder for several years now, I've done a lot of thinking in my own head, and what I've come to the conclusion that it really doesn't matter what I think as far as what I really like to do is create a forum where creative people can, for lack of a better word, brainstorm or imagine the future and then get excited to work together toward a goal. So in my mind, it's really about getting people to these meetings, and so I would say just creating lists of people that we can invite to the next meeting to talk about making, because I think we are all pretty passionate when it comes to making or creating. So one thing I've also found to be true is that I can go off on tangents within my own mind and get off focus. And so a question I have for you, Scott, if you were to imagine the High Desert Makers up and running as fully as possible in your mind, what would that look like over the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 months? What would that look like? How can I envision us fully?
Well, that's a great point. I think it's funny, actually, and Aaron and the DIY team and I have talked about this a couple of times, that they found themselves stepping up into a couple of the areas as DIY Cave that, from my perspective, should have fit within the High Desert Makers, both in terms of funding and supporting, and that's the educational side. I used one of the examples where, and in fact, the project that you all ran here last year for Christmas for the Bethlehem Inn to create the Christmas gifts. For what? Got it. So is absolutely the perfect example of gathering people together, putting some funds from the nonprofit side that are truly benefiting the public. I would say that if we were fully up and running, if this were fully functional, the juggernaut of the nonprofit and the tax exempt organization should be able to constantly feed through the grants and other inputs the outputs of educating, evangelizing the maker movement. I mean, remember that as opposed to a for-profit, we are specifically designed for a nonprofit and public benefit. And many of the donors or the grantors are going to give us money with the expectation of having performed this event, outreach, gift giving, creation, whatever, you have fulfilled the mission. You don't need to have made money or recouped it, as opposed to a traditional profit and loss, or like Aaron was saying, the money suck that has been the DIY cave that is, I mean, it's a small business. The second thing is, of course, the distributed nature of having people to do the work. That was always one of our original problems with the High Desert Makers, is that we had a lot of people that were interested with ideas, but until we had the makerspace itself, it was difficult to run projects that catalyzed people who would then step up and lead a class. There are 1,000 people that are going to say and would say, oh my God, I'm totally into this. I will help you with whatever you need once you get running. And in our particular case, for the Maker Mill itself, once we got running, that ultimately had exhausted all of the time, the efforts, the resources of the Maker Mill, and we closed our relationship with Cascade Divide at the time. Coincidentally,
excuse me. I realize I'm not in the room, but if anybody's dead, this won't happen at all, so Scott should put his mask on, please.
If there's what?
If they're dead, this doesn't make any difference. That's why we have masks.
So again, I think the idea really here is that the ultimate goal was, and to your point, the ultimate goal would be a fully operating, fully funded set of programs that's continuing to do activities and events that people, individual makers and organizations, are willing to step up and continue delivering. The whole point of the board was to make sure that the administration and that the organization itself was in place to keep all those things happening, but not to be the ones or the only ones to do the work. That's really what it comes down to. So I think really in this particular case, the gap that I see is that when the Maker Mill closed, that was the time when the DIY Cave and 9th Street Village were starting to grow. We made a recommendation, and ultimately was accepted, to move the High Desert Makers over to this facility to operate within the presence of all the makers and all the activity, with, if you build it or if you move it, they will come. What hasn't happened, and again, this has to do with, if we look back on the efficacy of the board is what it comes down to, is it hasn't attracted or hasn't been visible to the point where people have stepped in. And then the attrition of the team has led us down to where you are right now with 2 board members. So I think the other thing I was going to say, you asked what would it look like. You mentioned at the beginning a minute ago of this little segment here, I think one of your most important things is to make sure that your board is solid, because right now you are, as you just said, below the legal minimums. I have the same problem right now. I lost one of my board members to, he died, so I have to go replace him. So there's a certain amount of time when things actually just happen and you have to expand, but you're there and you've been there for a while. So I know you've got other people, and in fact, Kevin, who it sounds like is on the line, is one of the people that you had suggested, but I know there are more people that are ready and would like to step in and be those people that help put together the events, the activities, and actually use the resources of the High Desert Makers to achieve that public benefit, which in turn will bring and attract more people and let's, catalyze, get that cycle going. So I guess to me, back to your point about what a fully operational thing is, there's enough people that the work is happening and that the churn is happening, that there's money coming in, there's additional grants, and that there's a nice, diverse, community-led organization. I think tactically right now you have some immediate things, and that is to diversify the board. And to your point, we have these big events that are happening that came not because of the High Desert Makers, but came as a result of some of the other efforts of Connect Central Oregon, of DIY Cave, and just of the fact that we have continued to be visible outside to some high-profile people.
I agree, and I think at this point, one of the things that should be stated is I would assume, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but anybody who's in this room is interested in counting themselves as a member of High Desert Makers. You're interested in where we're going, you want to know more, you want to be on our email lists, things like that. And I have a tablet here. I'll be glad to collect your information before we leave so I can make sure you're on those mailing lists. But I would also ask, this is early in the process, but I would also ask if there's anybody who would even consider themselves as potentially being on a board. I'm not committing you tonight. I'm asking if there's anybody who'd like to be followed up with in the future who's here at the moment. If there's anyone, I'd be glad to talk to you afterwards. I've got one for sure. 2, 3, many of you, most of you, all right. So afterwards, well, heck, there's enough people here. I'll just say this. I'd like to put a list together of people who are interested in being on the board, and that doesn't mean that you're committed to 16 hours of labor a week, but it does mean that we're going to look to you to help us make good decisions and to help us direct the creativity of this organization as we attempt to start to fulfill those bylaws. It also means that we'll try to use you to help fill the board. So, yes.
I want to expand on that one more just to make sure that I want to reiterate, and don't take board service lightly. We're not asking you to step up to a committee. Right. Board service is a legal requirement. There are legal responsibilities, and in turn, the organization is also there to protect you against managing the public benefit. So don't get me wrong, board service means something. It is vitally important that there be a diverse set of people that are managing the public resources and the public benefit well, and to that end, the Secretary of State and the Department of Justice hold you accountable. Secondly, as the tax-exempt organization, the IRS holds us accountable. So those become very important things. It is not simply a matter of just this free-floating thing where you can just get people to write checks. It does require some accountability. Now, that said, the organization's already built. And we have two legal organizations that helped us develop this, knowing that we were going to put together this exact type of artisanal craft and maker program. So these are, the bylaws are written to protect everybody and make sure this is successful, knowing that this doesn't necessarily fit what a lot of people would call a traditional nonprofit model. But definitely as you're stepping up to board service, recognize that you are truly shepherding a public benefit. And don't just take it as lightly as a committee membership.
Well said, and very true.
Very important, actually, yeah.
Would you like to address anything about?
Well, from my vantage point, as I stated earlier, I've been sort of in my own head for several years now, and what I've noticed to be true is whenever I get talking about things in the making world, I get excited, and I find that the other person does as well. So, and I find also that the few activities that we have had have been a lot of fun, and it's at those events where everyone gets excited about making in Central Oregon. So, I think what we do need to do as an organization to invite more people into the conversation is we do need to maybe come up with some events. I mean, I heard you say, Scott, that it needs to be a continuous set of activities to continue to move the ball forward. So I think in the nearest term, as we decide what our next meeting should be, that we need to think about what would be fun, what would create excitement, what would people enjoy participating in, and then from those meetings we can see where the momentum takes us. Does that make sense? And then I would ask again too, I mean, how do you envision the makers helping you with the Maker Festival and with Make 24 or 48? Because I would love to come alongside and be purposeful about that as well.
Well, let me break it down into two different things. So Make 48, we have announced that it's coming. We haven't announced anything else, and we're not prepared to announce everything else. There is an existing committee right now that is talking to the Make 48 producers and we will develop and publish and communicate once it's ready. So it's not ready for public dissemination at the moment, so we're being very careful about that. The Maker Festival, the traditional development of a committee or a team that would prepare for a make event, whether it's a licensed maker fair or just a community maker event, is form a committee, find the fundraising, find the space, standard organizational type coordination with who's coming and communication. We need a committee formed. I have offered to continue stepping up, and in fact, right now, what I am saying is, I don't believe the High Desert Makers is in the current position to manage this. And in fact, it's the reason why I didn't come to the High Desert Makers prior to reserving the fairgrounds and kicking all this off. What I would say is the High Desert Makers needs to form and reform and restructure. But in the meantime, I, as Connect Central Oregon, am planning to kick off the planning committee for the Maker Festival, the November 2021 Maker Festival. At some point, if we expect as a collective team, if we think that the High Desert Makers is prepared to basically take point and take lead, it is. I mean, it's by its very definition, that is what the intent was. You're just not ready right now. That's the bottom line. I would say to you the second thing, arguably, and I'm looking around at the different people that potentially are going to step up and serve in these roles to help the High Desert Makers expand, recognize that your visibility becomes really important. Jack, you and I have talked about this before, just animated evangelism and so on becomes a really important part. And these days, especially with the current, I guess the way that we need to have a chief executive officer who handles the business side of it and a chief marketing officer. It is very rare that you find those in the same role in many cases. And it's, especially in something as diverse as the maker movement, to have somebody that is really just constantly that public information officer, as well as that executive, as well as that project manager. And I don't see that right now. So I would definitely say that as a group, we would step in and say, okay, this person's going to be handling the business side of it. This one's handling the project management. This one is the public information officer or the face of. So what I would hope that the High Desert Makers is doing is growing these people. And I'm just looking around at the different people, and I'm not looking on Skype or on Zoom at the moment, but I would say, who is the person as you form this board that is fulfilling each of those new roles? Because it's, well, and maybe the other way to say this is, given that you have a few people who have offered their services up to step up as board service, I don't feel like I would have to offer myself up to help bridge a gap while we continue to grow it. I will continue to serve my role as the executive director of Connect Central Oregon and proxying that public information officer, if you will, and project manager towards the Maker Festival. That seems to be the role that, based on what I'm seeing and hearing, that I'm gonna fit best in for the moment.
But Scott, this is Kevin. If I can interrupt, I've got a really quick question. I'm unsure. Connect Central Oregon. I've looked at your website here, and I'm unsure how that's different than High Desert Makers. So are these redundant organizations?
Okay, so Connect Central Oregon exists and is going, and in fact the website itself, as you're seeing right now, is literally being reworked right now, and it's being relaunched effectively at the end of the month. Connect Central Oregon has a very specific mission, and that is to create social engagement through service learning. Service learning to us is internships. It is that introspective, reflective work with the interns that we're doing, and it's one of the reasons why we're partnered with OSU Cascades Innovation Collab, because we are using that organization to help really, as I say, put adult supervision over a lot of programs. It's robotics, we run the Ignite program, we have a couple of other social engagement activities. I certainly could roll under as a program or a project, High Desert Makers, but yes, they're similar in the sense of they're intended to engage community. High Desert Makers has an exclusive focus towards the maker movement and the STEM activities as it relates to the maker movement. Does that clarify it for you?
I'm sorry, put myself on mute. So Connect Central Oregon, again, I'm sorry, I don't quite see the difference between that and High Desert Makers. I'm sorry.
I'm not able to offer some kind of assistance in that because I'm more of an outside observer of Connect Central Oregon, but Connect Central Oregon is definitely focused on, I'm going to say, technology internships for people who are interested in learning more about everything from drones to streaming media to social media. Its heaviest lean seems to be, on the surface, that technical internship that allows people to get into that field. The subjects that they cover are often maker-centric or maker-related, but they are all over the board.
Okay.
Whereas the maker movement in the form of High Desert Makers is definitely more about hands-on, STEM-based, or at least STEM cognizant activities, and far more, I would call it grassroots. I'll call it much more tactile, much more engaged activities. That would be my off-the-cuff assessment of that. How close am I there?
Well, I mean, you're very close, and Kevin, I think the easiest way to say it is Connect Central Oregon's breadth and depth with the projects that we work on, specifically to create social engagement, go far beyond the maker movement itself. High Desert Makers is focused on maker movement. So I guess I'm happy to follow up with you after the call here to expand a little bit more and show you a little bit about what the purposes and powers are for Connect Central Oregon. But for right now, just absolutely understand that they are two very distinct organizations, and that the program that I'm running as Connect Central Oregon is complementary. Or in fact, one of the other terms that we use, which is ironic, is that we call ourselves, Connect Central Oregon, the force multiplier. And as people ask me what that means, they're either thinking of the military side, or I bring it back to even the maker side. We're a hammer. When you need to put in a nail, you bring us out, we help you achieve what your goals are, but then you put us back. We don't need to be, and in fact, we're not a direct overlay with whatever your mission is. And to that end, we, Connect Central Oregon, I run a broadcast engineering program. I run Ignite, which is the speaking engagement program. We have a couple of other governmental-based organizations or opportunities programs that are coming up. Again, those have absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with anything related to the maker movement. At its core, though, what they're doing is they are taking students, and student is not necessarily a young student, but is taking students and giving them meaningful internships to grow our next generational leaders. So that's Connect Central Oregon. Now, in that particular case, the questions you're asking me really center around what my focus has been. My focus originally back, and to know a little bit more about me, you can certainly look into my LinkedIn profile. That's a lot more detailed than the Connect Central Oregon website right now. I've been building teams and building organizations for many years. When I was asked to step up from the maker movement here in Central Oregon to help create what became the High Desert Makers, it's after many, many years down in the Bay Area putting together events, putting together maker movement activities, running maker fairs, running robotics activities, and being a maker myself. So I stepped into a role and specifically stepped into a term to help prepare the organization. And so that I hope you understand, that's why the organization is here, why High Desert Makers is here. What it needs, and again, this is back to what the board is, it needs a fully fleshed out board so that it continues to represent what the community wants to see from a maker organization. I've got a board for Connect Central Oregon that's taking care of what I need, but they are two distinct organizations.
All right, that's been very helpful. Thank you, Scott.
Well, it really is about next steps, because I mean, I really want to know how we can have some action steps that you and I or whomever else who wants to be involved can take in the next couple weeks, and then reconvene and make progress. That's what I would like to see happen.
So Did you have a date of a potential next meeting?
I'm just thinking a month's too long and a week might be too soon, so I thought 2 weeks from today would be good on my calendar.
I feel like that's good. And then the subjects covered at that meeting, obviously, we need to convene a board. That's going to be a big one. And so that's going to be a subject of the next meeting is those of you who've given me your contact information tonight, I'll talk with Jack and I'll talk with Scott as well because he set up the bylaws. He knows quite a bit about this. But we'll iron out that process and then I'll probably contact each one of you individually just to talk more about what it would mean to be on the board and what your interests directly are. There's everything from simple things such as being the secretary, which is critically important, and then there's being in charge of marketing and stuff like that. And we not only will have positions that you can help us out in many ways, we will also empower you in those positions. So it's not like you go, hey, you're marketing, all right, best of luck. We already have social media accounts. We have funding if we decide we need to push money down any particular path in order to make something happen. It's a little bit more than just like show up and stand around with your clipboard and try to say hello to people. So all of that we can develop in the next 2 weeks. We can start that process. But at that meeting, we're going to want to ratify a board so that we can move forward as much as possible. The second thing that we're going to want to do at that meeting is we're going to want to make an actual action list of things to do to build momentum for these upcoming events.
Get the calendar out,
Calendar and the whiteboard.
Right, because I think we've tried to dabble in that, in getting some things started in our previous iteration, but I think it'd be important for us to be a little more aggressive this year because time is of the essence.
Anybody else have any input or suggestions
Yeah,
on things that they would like to see us talk about or cover?
So I have a real quick thought for the next meeting. If we could create a list of all the different maker organizations or organizations like Connect Oregon that we might be able to have an impact on. To be honest, I don't really have a comfortable understanding of everybody that's out there.
Idea. I think part of that list is already created, but it probably could use an updating.
Let's end this on.
Yeah, I also want to thank you all for being here. We don't have to wait for, I'm sorry,
Yeah, sorry, I had a,
didn't see your mouth moving.
yeah, sorry, I was turning this on to start it going, but I just want to check in as well, as a fairly newcomer to this group.
What's your name?
I'm Alex.
Alex. Hi, Alex.
Yeah. Hi. You touched on a comment about building this board to actually deliver what people want to see from a maker organization. We've also talked about events being one of the biggest kind of outputs of this organization. I just want to check in that is like, what do people want to see from this organization? Do we feel that is the biggest output? I think this is probably the biggest question from my mind about an output of this group. What is the measurable output? And it is events being a really big piece. I don't know if there are other things that we're missing or if we've asked that question recently or just assuming that the answer is the same as it used to be. I'd love to kind of get a few more, maybe just an exploration into that. I think would be pretty good.
So it's interesting that you're asking that question at the time when we're talking about a Maker Festival, because in so many ways, the Maker Festival, and if it becomes a licensed Maker Fair, serves in many regards as kind of a pinnacle event. I mean, they don't get a whole lot bigger than that. The fact that we're throwing into that an actual syndicated television show that is going to tie in all of these entrepreneurial and maker organizations is, I can't even believe what 2021 already has in store for us. Many of the events that we ran as High Desert Makers to continue to evangelize were, we had a booth at the different craft fairs. We had the X Derby, the Pinewood Derby type activity. We had, we would show up at libraries quite often with subject matter experts. We'd hold meetups. So maybe the way to say it is, the community in many cases doesn't necessarily know what they want. It actually takes a subject matter expert that is in a particular field or technology to put something together. One recent example that we ran as Connect Central Oregon is when the comet was out here. We've got an incredible number of people that are interested in space. Well, we didn't necessarily put together a meetup with the astronauts and the astronomers and all the different groups because we couldn't. Instead, we brought our camera and a couple of pieces of gear out on top of Coyote Butte and just sat there and live streamed it for a couple hours and, talked about it. And we had an incredible number of people that actually came back and said, oh my God, that was great. I wanted to get out there, but I couldn't, or I didn't know this. Thank you for sharing the website where we go get this info. That was it. It was done. I mean, literally, we folded the equipment up and that became the end of that particular task. But in our particular case, we had a very nice, easy engagement. Those people, then the question becomes, what's next? Sort of what's the call to action next? We used to talk about in the early planning days, the whole what's next concept. Those of you that are familiar with West Wing, it was stolen right out of the President Bartlett's comment about what's next. But the idea is, after you've introduced somebody to a new idea, technology, or whatever, you want to at least have a direction for them to go. Sure, you've taught them how to pick locks, but are you giving them direction to go pick locks? Not necessarily, but it might be to go learn more about how locks are secured around the world, or how, I'm just using that as a nice easy one because lock picking is one of the great examples where people are threatened by it until they understand that what we're doing is we're showing people how things work. They're getting excited and charged, even if they never go anywhere. But some are going to say, oh my God, I want to know how that works, or I know how I could secure that to make it better. Again, that becomes either an entrepreneurial or an investigatory activity that they move on. It's another one of those learning moments. So my simple feedback to you would be, take whatever is your subject matter expertise and figure out how to do a talk or involve a couple other people. Your measure of success should be the existence of that activity. And then out of that, you're going to figure out what the next measures are going to be. Are people asking you to put together a forge out in the back? Are they asking you to make more laser time available? I mean, these are real ones that came out of different meetups that we had. And they wouldn't have come to us otherwise until we showed people what it could do.
To that point, I would say that is a good reason why we need to develop a fully functioning board again, because those are the kind of questions that should come up and should be looked at and should be discussed among the board. Partially because that's how we grow, and partially because that's how we refine. And our bylaws are incredibly well written and they're fantastic, but there's always room to either add or subtract from them as well. I think that the mission statement is both broad and, like Scott mentioned, it's compartmentalized as well. So as an organization, it may at any given time shift our focus from something like doing events to doing STEM-based learning. It could be the kind of thing where we've noticed anyways, for example, during COVID, there's been a tremendous amount of children trying to learn remotely, trying to learn from home, and they don't have access to the same environment that they were used to in their learning process. And in fact, some parents have taken a great responsibility and a great burden in trying to make sure their kids are getting a good education. And that mission right there of being able to provide experiences for those children to expand their knowledge and expand their skill set and expand their exposure to new education and new concepts and ideas is a really big part of the maker movement as a whole. And so if high desert makers can develop that kind of contingency to where, thankfully, hopefully, we're not having to worry about COVID as a school situation in the future, but to give parents something outside of that school environment to say, hey, you want to learn about reading trail signs out in the wilderness for wild animals. Hey, you want to go see the comet or any type of astronomical events. Hey, you want to learn about science and learn about electronics with Arduino and Raspberry Pi and other microprocessors. That field of making is so wonderfully broad that we can determine what we believe the community would benefit from and focus on that as the committee should decide to focus us. Yes, sir?
Ah,
You just wanted to press
the
that
red light
button.
means on. Yeah, I had nothing to say. I was just gonna. To that point, I think that the organization could be well served by appropriate data. Data. Appropriate data.
Yes.
Yeah, I know, coming from me.
What a shock.
I think a lot of these ideas of the community wants, the community wants, the community wants. Show me the data that say the community wants this. I mean, yeah, you can, if you build it, they will come. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that was the most optimal to offer.
Correct.
So, market research and something that can actually somewhat definitively tell us that X, Y, and Z are what people are looking for and what we can then shift to provide.
I love it.
Well, Doc, that's kind of what we're intending to do, right? Is to, promote the fact that we're out here, that we've got all these diverse maker communities in the area. So we're trying to promote that, right? And so, isn't that the purpose of the organization? That people may not know they want it until they know it's available.
And what better place to grab a tremendous amount of data than at, say, a maker festival, with a booth and a seminar, and a quick 5-minute survey and that kind of thing. There's a lot of opportunities for us to get out there and check the pulse, but I don't want to wait that long.
So there's a kind of a twofold approach at this. There's one of finding the data on how we're supposed or how we could approach things. So asking people questions, finding that out, which would better inform our direction, not just inform of what's available to them. But that's the secondary point. We ask a question to a random person who's never thought about making.
Right.
If you had the decision, what would you make? A, B, or C? They're now thinking about making. And that gives them the intro into contacting us, finding a makerspace. But it's more than just a survey.
Right.
It's advertisement.
It's guided in its purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think we can see that Doc will be involved in marketing.
Ish. I just want data. I'll do anything
As long
for
as
data.
the marketing gets you data, you'll be involved.
Yep.
Well, and Aaron, you said it yourself, you don't want to wait that long. And I expect that you will get the data you're asking for. And one of the reasons why we're actually kind of excited about pushing out to November, of course, is we're all hoping that we're going to be able to even hold a public event. Now, keep in mind that, and for those that are familiar with the Deschutes County Fairgrounds, I've rented every space of grass, the same as you would for the normal the fair. I've rented the large event center, which is the concert room and so on, the High Desert Activities Center, and there's plenty of space for us to socially distance if we still need to, and that includes setting up booths that are still going to be a very viable maker fair and a very viable event to happen in November. Now, one of the other things that I wanted to mention, and I think this is a good time, for those that are familiar with locally here that have 10th graders or have learned about the Pursuit Conference. The Pursuit Conference has run 2 years in a row at the River House, and it brought every 10th grader that could into a career technical sort of career pathing conversation. I'm minimizing it, I'm not doing a good enough job, but the idea was it was getting big enough that it was going to head to the fairgrounds this year, November 2020. Obviously, COVID prevented that. A significant part of the formal licensed maker fairs is educational activities and components. And in fact, the last couple of years of the Pursuit Conference, we've brought a few little maker activities. DIY Cave's been out there, we brought our broadcast gear, and we've interspersed and intermixed the two with the idea that we're gaining information about what the youth want to do. These are youth that are literally trying to figure out what to do with their lives in many cases, or have already been given a lot of the training guidance or seeds to figure out what they may want to do. We are currently reserved at the fairgrounds for Saturday, Sunday, Monday. The idea is that Monday is still held tentatively for the Pursuit Conference. This is 2021, we're talking about November. The current belief by the local school districts is that even by November 2021, they won't allow that many students to be packed into the buses to get bussed up there. So it may be that we only end up running a Maker Festival. At that point, it is our audience that we can collect data from is those that choose to attend. So of course, we intend to attract people, projects, programs, and do enough evangelism and advertising that people will go, and out of that, we'll see a breadth of enough information, ideas, and so on, that they will then say, oh my God, I want to learn how to blow glass. I had never thought about doing pottery. I can learn how to use a saw, things that fit the very basic expectations, and in some cases, they're going to ask for connections to their schools, they're going to ask for private learning or instruction, or they're really just going to ask for mentoring from somebody that wants and knows what they're doing. So Aaron said a moment ago, we don't want to wait until November. So there's enough information that we've got, and DIY Cave has been fantastic at collecting that, because through a lot of the interviews and a lot of the activities that you've done, including recently with the schools, you wouldn't continue putting on classes that weren't in demand. So I think I walked in on one the other day that was the leathercraft, right? So there's another perfect example where there are people asking for a specific skill. I'm hearing all the time, the forge, I bring that up. So right out of the gate, I would say to you, put together a forging activity or a leathercraft activity. Let's make 1,000 bracelets in a weekend. One we did with the library many years ago was laser cut ornaments. And we did that when we actually had the Maker Mill open. And the public were able to work on it. They went to a class, were able to work on it on their own at the library later, and then came back or submitted them to us to actually cut if they couldn't make it, and then they came back to the library to pick it up. All of those not only fit within the charter of what the Maker Mill was, but in many cases, because we were the nonprofit and we were partnered with a nonprofit organization, we served a need because the library came back and said, we got a lot of people that can't afford a membership or access to a school laser cutter or the supplies even. So using the laser cut one as an example, we used the resources of the High Desert Makers and bought all the material. So again, back to the data, don't discount that you already have a lot of that data to actually kick off some of these small activities and just start catalyzing. But yeah, I can't wait to see what 2022 looks like with that data. And I've actually said this internally a couple of times, and I'll reiterate it. If the High Desert Makers as an organization at the end of 2021, with the amount of lead up that we're planning to do with the activities, Make 48 and the Maker Festival, if we can't figure out how to measure or how to get the right team together, fold the organization, because you got a year and you've got a full run-up of, 8 years that it's been in existence. There's money and there's the right people. If we as an organization and if Central Oregon can't figure out how to provide or collect the data and build a team, then this organization shouldn't operate. And I have every confidence, and I'm sitting here because I have every confidence, we have the right people that are asking the right questions. They just have to step up to do it. Here, should I glare over here? Yeah. Because I'm facing the same thing. I recently had an interview with a potential board member who was really upset that I wasn't doing enough for grant reviews. And I said, okay, well, tell me what you do. He goes, I do grant reviews. And I said, it's almost like I'm trying to recruit you to do grant reviews, right? Don't discount that your particular skill set or experience or your particular desire to get something out of High Desert Makers in order to provide action to the community. You might be the person we're waiting for. And you might be the person that this organization needs to get that data and ultimately deliver it.
We got it worked out, so.
Yeah. See, there you go. That's exactly, well, and honestly, as you just said, you already have it worked out. That's the other thing we find. We find this all the time. If you build it, they will come. And the truth is, and we've been waiting for it, but there's been COVID. There's been the Bevel Brewing and the building of the campus here. There's been the closure of the Maker Mill. I mean, we've got 100 reasons why certain things didn't happen. Every one of us stepped back and said, whoa, the planets are aligned in 2021 for the first time ever. And it even went further with this Make 48 opportunity, which we have COVID to thank. So that's why I'm saying, in some ways, this is the year that we've been waiting for to become the overnight success.
I had a question for Mr. Burnett. Most of you know that he's a faculty member at OSU, and I believe OSU is full of a lot of students. You were telling me recently that you've just been asked to perform a role. Could you repeat what you told me as far as your role there now?
Yes,
Recently...
so in general, the OSU Cascades campus has been growing. We have a campus. Mm-hmm. We used to be on COCC. We're now having the construction on our academic building number 2, which is now Ed Ray Hall from the previous OSU president. And in that space that me and some of my colleagues in the kinesiology realm have been integral with is developing the lab space for kines stuff, as well as our DPT program, Doctorate of Physical Therapy, and then the maker space that is planned to be in that building as well. And there have not been, as far as I know, any definitive processes that have been applied to it, outside of we want a maker space that allows students to bring ideas to the table, manage them, and make them a reality, which is exceedingly vague, because that can include any number of manufacturing or the planning process or marketing process or graphic design process for sales. The list goes on. So we're currently working on that idea. We just recently put together a task force to kind of figure out where we might want to apply some funds, if we had them. Again, the goal being to enhance the ability of our students to bring their ideas to market, or their ideas to be patented. So we've got the students. Mm-hmm. We wanted to have the infrastructure and the space to get there.
Doc, is it going to be a mentored space? Are there going to be mentors in there for the students?
There will be, yeah. So the faculty members are going to be the mentors that kind of get the students there. And then there's going to be, hopefully, individuals that are going to direct those groups to the resources that they may need. Cool. So I have a piece of fitness equipment that I'm developing with some students, but I don't know the engineering. I don't know the marketing. I don't know those kind of things. That center would have a liaison that would help direct that whole process.
Cool.
That's the hope.
Right.
We're currently figuring those things out, but it's slated to be a space for creation.
That's cool. I realized that we have talked a bit tonight about Make 48, but we never really gave an elevator pitch of what Make 48 is. Most of you just hear the name, don't know what it is. Just, you should look online, and honestly, we don't know what it'll be because this is a new version out of a chrysalis. We have something completely new. But the concept remains the same. Make 48 for the last several years has generated these contests, and in these contests, groups of makers would be formed into teams. not huge teams, but teams. And they would all gather in one area, usually at a large college or campus of some type. And there, a large corporate sponsor who was sponsoring the event would throw out an incredibly difficult challenge, something that would require creativity and engineering and who knows what, but a problem that needs to be solved. Those teams would then have 48 hours. You see where the Make 48 goes, you got that. 48 hours within the making facilities that they are given there to come up with an idea, prototype it, market it, create it, and then present it to the judging sponsor who would then pick the winners.
Not enough time.
Hardly enough time, but hey, that's what competitions are all about. So without the ability to bring those teams into those big areas, those big confined structures anymore, they've decided to have it so you basically have a small team, maybe just one team in a city. Maybe it's a couple teams in a city, but it's a small group, and you're given a maker space that you have 48 hours in. So that's where DIY Cave comes into it, is we have the facility. We have the tooling, we have some capability to share to create the center for one of these cities. There will be 10 cities. What that looks like, we don't know yet. They have a much better idea, and we are consistently in connection with Make 48 as we develop and pursue down this path. And so I don't want to talk much more about how that may look, but I want you to understand it will be sort of an exciting 48-hour contest of minds and creativity and engineering, with the intention of coming out of it with a team that creates something amazing. And then those teams that will be considered the top teams in America will compete again in 2022. Did you have something?
The only thing I was going to expand on is that the Make 48 as the organization, as the company that is producing this product, is using those 10 cities to do exactly what Aaron just said, to elevate one team who will then compete in 2022. They have national sponsors to their program, and in fact, across the 10 cities, they have national sponsors that are locking in all of the marketing, all the relationships. 9 of the 10. Because of what we have already built here in Central Oregon, and because of the background of the individuals that are already involved, they have allowed us to break that exclusivity with the national sponsor, and we can actually gain some marketing effort and some connectivity, whatever we decide to create internally here as Central Oregon, so long as it stays within Central Oregon and Oregon. I mean, we're not competing against the Make 48 product. They not only love it, it actually meets the spirit of what being a maker is, which is why they love it, because it's the free sharing of ideas. And he's like, I'm a maker too, and I'm producing a product that I want to help you produce. So part of what he's doing that for is to allow us, the community, and in particular Bend and Central Oregon, to use all of that to market and show people how cool it is. And at its heart, it's a television show. It's a television show with a competition.
Can you remind us what the timelines are of
That event?
Still slipping and sliding all over the place. It will be in the fall.
Okay.
It could be as early as August. It could be as late as October. But we expect it to be, I expect it to be August, September, based on most recent conversations. But really, we don't know. In fact, Make 48 is sending someone here in February to look at the facilities and further those conversations. So we don't have a lot to announce at this time. All we want to make sure is that you understand, as a group, the gravity of the opportunities that are coming down the road, instead of going, oh man, I wish I'd have known that was coming, I'd have done A, B, C, and D. This is that opportunity to put that hard work in front of that opportunity, so that, like I said earlier, I consider lucky to be just the result of hard work at the right opportunity. And in a different version of that, I wanted to be that guy who everybody said, oh, he's lucky. But they didn't realize the 20 years of failures and hard work that went into being at that right place at the right time with the right skill set, with the right opportunity. It could be that you are lucky, but you are lucky and prepared and have paid your price. So I want us to be lucky as an organization. I want us to be in that right place at the right time with the right people in place and the right concepts and ideas and values. And that means we've got to start today, which brings us to kind of where we need to go from here, which is we have another meeting 2 weeks from now. We do have things we need to do in that meeting that are business related, such as, making sure we've defined the board and things like that. But we also need to start developing that call to action for how do we make sure we are progressing and not just talking and talking and talking. Talk's great. Action has value as well. In fact, sometimes more value than talking. So my 2 cents would be that at that meeting, the meat and potatoes of that meeting is going to be a big old whiteboard and us having open discussion and pitching concepts of how to gain traction throughout the rest of this year, how to spread the word throughout this year, how to get that data that we need to get, how to impact people's lives in such a way that they join in, and not just that we bring this to the table in the autumn and fall time of the year, but that in fact we bring more of us to the table, that there's a swelling of members and there's a swelling of people who are excited about what this thing can be, so that when we plug into these activities, we are an amazing force to be reckoned with, and we are sharing so much cool stuff. I'd love it if the organization becomes so large and so active that there are literally things happening that we barely even know about, that there are groups of people who are tackling things that we are hearing about and never even getting a chance to attend because it's such a fireball of activity. But that's my 2 cents.
I keep imagining there's people out there in the community that have great ideas and would love to do an event or do some big splash, but they just don't have the resources or the venue or the encouragement or the, just the nuts and bolts of what it would take. But if given the opportunity to do something, maybe it might be their big splash, in their life, but if they were invited where it would not be overwhelming for them. I think you could see a lot of makers come out of the woodwork with harebrained ideas that are fascinating.
Before we close the meeting, is there anyone else, Kevin, you're included in this, is there anybody else who has any 2 cents to add or anything they'd like to say? Doc, you have the floor.
Last thing, it's really just one of the most important things that I see in making, and I've seen it with people that I've interacted with, and I've seen it in data in research studies, is that self-efficacy, your ability to do things, makes or breaks your enjoyment on this planet. And if you can show people that they can be effective on their own, it changes their world. It absolutely changes the world. And that's one of the reasons why I'm here, is that I want other people to experience that ability to be self-effective for whatever you're doing and not have to rely on others and not have to feel bad about not being able to.
Well said. Thank you. And anyone else?
I'd just like to say if we could ignite that realization in even, a couple dozen kids in this community, and create that aha moment where they know that they can, boy, that'll change a life, And I think you have a lot of people in this community that, I think there's no greater reserve of goodwill than that of all of us for the kids, and if we could create a way for kids to have some self-realization that they can too, or they can do that, or what makes them tick, what's so special about you, if they could find that early in life, boy, it would reduce a lot of struggles.
Hey, we see that every day here at the
That's true. That's true.
The younger the better,
And we have
or the older the better, who knows,
True.
Toddlers on the take, well, they'll get there.
But anyway, I mean, that's the few moments of joy that I've experienced in the last 4 years have been those moments when either I realized that I could do that, or I saw it in someone else's eyes that light up when they got it, like, aha, I don't have to go buy that, I can actually go do that. And it's just pretty amazing, and I think you're right, I mean, it's very special. So if we could somehow be the place where people have an opportunity to experience something like that, I think this place will explode, you know.
All right, I have nothing more to add. Do you want to close out the meeting?
Sure, anybody else, really? I mean, I'd invite any other thoughts. Again, I'm going to think about what I can do for next meeting, but I would invite you all too to, you know, come with some ideas so that we can hit the ground running. 2 weeks is a long time when, you know, that'll be the second half of January already, so.
Yeah, true.
You know, so.
Yeah, is there anything you would like us to be thinking on or mentally mulling over before the next meeting? It sounds like we're going to do some brainstorming. I always like to come off with some ideas just to kind of see.
Right.
What we're thinking.
I have one little thing to add to that, and to what we're talking about in general, is this group here is the leadership team, essentially. What this needs now is leadership. So think about what you can bring to the table as a leader in this group, because what will happen as the group gets bigger, they won't all be on the board necessarily, but the board has to lead the ship. So as you're an individual, what's your superpower? What do you bring to the table, and what do you want to step up for in that leadership position on the board? Because that will then in turn allow you to create those groups of people, those committees that are going to form this, and this, and this. And that's what I would want you to go with, and then come back with something that you feel like you're bringing to the table that we can all count on you for.
It's a good point.
It's a really good
Bring
point.
your strengths back to the table. And I would second that motion. I would also say that in my personal goal of where this organization goes this summer is, if I had to encapsulate it in a word or in a concept, it would be discover the maker in you. I think most people are makers deep down. They just don't know it or they don't believe it. Maybe your only skill is that you can make the world's best chocolate chip cookies because it's just natural for you. You're good at it because that happens to be what you're good at. You are good at that making. Maybe you've never even seen a welding machine in your life. That doesn't make you not a maker. It just means that your maker skill is specific to a set. And surprisingly, that skill is very valuable to many, many people. If I could find somebody who could teach me how to make an amazing snickerdoodle, man, I would be down there right now.
Oh, yeah, we'll be in line.
Yeah, exactly. Give me the snickerdoodle. So that would be my thing, is awakening the maker in this community and helping people realize that they may not see themselves as a maker until someone says, what do you know how to do really well? What is it that you can do? I don't care if it's just how to balance a basketball on your finger. I've never done that. I mean, there are people out there and they have skills that are what they would consider low on the totem pole, and someone else is going to consider that high. That's my thought. My thought is, how in the world do we draw people out and make them realize that they are already a maker and that they are already a part of this community? They just need to engage. So
I'd go so far as to say, if you could unite that person with that inner signature, if you will, the world will pay them for that unique gift, you know.
I'm waiting for that.
Are you?
I was going to say, look at Doc. Doc is the maker in many, many ways, but prior to showing up at DIY Cave, had you ever touched a lathe?
Oh, no.
Never, right?
I was scared to use the miter saw.
Right,
Someone
right.
told, I think it was Dave, said, oh yeah, go cut that on the miter. I'm like, no supervision?
Right.
Now I have a full home shop.
Right, you've gone full tilt on there. And our focus is always in using you as an example of the lathe, because you have really taken a love of the lathe, and you really have a passion for making things on the lathe, and it shows in the stuff you produce. And that happens to be a skill that you had no idea would come naturally to you. And I say naturally because it appears to the rest of us that it has come naturally. I know that you put a lot of time into that lathe. But that's a skill that you have passion for now, and you enjoy sharing that passion with others. And I believe that that is part of the mission of the makers, is to help you discover that thing that you're good at, that you may not even know you're good at yet, and then make you passionate about it, and so that you share it with others. And the mission of the makers is fulfilled at that point. So that's what I would say. Bring to the table next time. What is your skills, even if you think they're petty, whatever your skills might be to help with this leadership of this organization. Maybe you're really good at typing emails, because that's an amazing skill, trust me. What are your skills on the leadership side, but also what are you good at as a maker? What is it that you enjoy making and you'd love to share? Scott is famous for wanting, and I think several times showing, the danger of cooking a turkey in hot oil. That's in hot oil. That's a thing it's a big thing around Thanksgiving. And Scott, that's a skill. I wouldn't even know where to begin to set that up, because he sets it up specifically for failure. It's not how do you cook a turkey in hot oil, it's how do you catastrophically cook a turkey in hot oil. And Scott, that's his skill. And guess what? People are passionate about seeing that and finding out about it.
And I'm thank you for bringing that one back up, because I'm thinking back to some of the original founders of the Maker Mill and the High Desert Makers. We overloaded a Christmas tree with the fire marshal sitting there on a day when it was negative 20 degrees and we couldn't get the damn thing to light. But the idea was we had set up a condition that everyone's like, oh no, that's dangerous. Like, more juice. The saw stop demonstrations that people do with hot dogs all the time. You're destroying the saw stop at the moment, but you are doing that in the interest of sharing. That's another one of those, and as you're saying that, spend the money, because you're gaining the output of what you're trying to do as the High Desert Makers is you've inspired somebody, even if it's that aha moment for that one person. But what we are finding and continue to find, even in ourselves, is that it's more than just one person, and it's more than that one aha moment. It becomes the catalyst to everything else. So that's the other reason why it's easy to forget, as we're looking at the intricacies of board service and bylaws and paperwork and all these pieces. We've talked at great length about the amount of time that I haven't been making since putting together a maker organization. I'm looking forward and have been continuing to make. But now I'm also reversing it back. We're going to go back and we're going to go rebuild the organization. So I'm excited about where we are. I thank you. I mean, this is a catalyst. I'm looking forward to seeing what you all come up with, and I'm looking forward to seeing how this forms. And to that end, I will continue to offer the resources of my organization, because it's intended to create social engagement. So you shouldn't have to rebuild what I'm building. Draw upon me, and vice versa. I'm not going to go build a makerspace or a maker movement. I am, for the moment, simply proxying the project manager for, and public face, if you will, for the Maker Festival as we go forward, until we're ready to flip that and step in. I mean, make me irrelevant, or make me replaceable. That's my measure of success that I look back for this organization. So
We're cutting into my making time. I just
Yep.
want to point that out.
We are,
What time is it?
it's time to wrap this up.
Okay, well, I'm very excited to move forward with more content, and I think that's really what we want to move toward now is content, because I think that'll create energy, and it'll create interest, and it'll attract people as well. So I think we're set. I think it's the 19th, is that right? What's today? The 5th? So it'd be January 19th, 4:30.
It would be Wednesday would be the 20th.
The 20th. Okay.
Right, we can have a celebration.
What's happening on that day?
Yeah, what's that?
Maybe it'll be as exciting as this day.
Kevin, I missed that. What was that?
I say maybe we can have a celebration.
So Wednesday the 20th, same back time, same back channel. Everybody good for that?
So- And I don't have all your phone numbers. I'd love to follow up.
I collected
You
them.
have phone numbers as well? Okay. I'd love to follow up personally with each of you and just,
So
All
we
right.
can do this as a Zoom meeting.
Yeah, we may end up doing that. It's very true.
So I've got a Zoom account, so we can set up a meeting on Zoom.
Right.
okay then.
All right, everybody, thank you for coming. I appreciate it. I'll be in contact with you all via email, and, yeah, I'm excited about where this is gonna go. So, and thank you to Connect Central Oregon for setting up all the audio, video, and streaming. I really appreciate that.
Get some more people to participate, but can't make it in.
There you go. All right, good night, everybody.